We have a new chapter. It's called Solving Equations. You've done just about everything in this chapter in the past. Okay? You may have forgotten some of it. That's okay. The techniques I'm going to show you is maybe different than your last year's teacher. So this is what I'm going to show you, sort of how you redo this in grade 9. And in grade 10, we use the same sort of techniques to solve equations. All right, so we can start off with writing your name. All right, we are block 3 of day 1. So 1-3, right? Dhaliwal. All right. Okay, so we're just going to get a few questions going today and let these ideas sit in your mind. We're not going to do the whole lesson today. Next day, we're going to finish off the lesson and do the assignment. All right, so what we have is a bunch of equations where you need to figure out what is the value of the letter that makes the left side and the right side equal to each other. Jaden, head up. All right, now before we get going, the essence behind this lesson, this whole chapter next year, is your ability to spot math operations. When I say the words math operations, I'm talking about the operation of adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. Right? You need to be able to spot all those calculations inside of an equation. Right? So, and you got to realize that every single one of those has opposites. So, if I'm adding, what is the opposite of adding? Subtracting. Shh. Just raise your hand. Right? Therefore, the other way around, subtraction, the opposite is adding. Right? Then we have multiplication. Maxim? Division. Thank you. Is division. Opposite of multiplication is division. And therefore, for division, the opposite operation is multiplication. All right. Okay. So what we need to do is you're going to hear the phrase isolate the variable. All that means is get the letter all by itself on that one side of the equation. That means move all the numbers away from it. That's all that means. Right? Isolate. Isolate alone. Right? So you can get equations looking very, very different. But that's the simple process. So what we're going to do is whenever you have an equation, so we're going to go over here. We're going to split at the equal sign. All right? The equal sign means the left side and the right side are equal in weight. So if we change one side, we have to change the other side in order to keep them equal. Right? And our goal is, I want you to do this when you're doing these questions, especially at the beginning when you get confused, is always just cover up the side, right, that doesn't have the letter. And you just focus on this side. And you go, okay, my goal is to get this letter by itself. That means this 12 needs to go away. And the question you ask yourself, what is the math operation between the 12 and the letter? Is it adding? Is it subtracting? Is it multiplying? Or is it dividing?
What is the D?
Shh. It's multiplying, right? So D is our variable. That's what you're trying to find out. So there, remember, shh, if you don't see an operation between a number and a letter, it's a times. To get rid of a number that you don't want, you always do the opposite operation. So opposite of multiplying is dividing. To get rid of this 12, we divide by 12. And the way we're going to divide by 12 is maybe your last year's teacher may have done something like this, divide by 12 like that. We're not going to do that. Whenever we are dividing, we're going to divide with a fraction line. A fraction line means same thing as dividing. Okay? Fraction line 12. Okay, now we do the same thing to the other side. So if I divide this side by 12, and that means I need to make this side smaller too. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. Divide by 12. Okay? So now we clean it up. So when we're doing this, it should be mirrored. Whatever you do over here, you do over there. So we go, okay, 12 divided by 12. What number do you get?
0.
Not 0. 1. So those cancel each other out. Shh. And you're left with just a D or a 1D. A 1 in front of a letter you don't have to show. So one, just a D here. And that was the whole point, to get the D by itself. Right? Then on the other side, you go 84 divided by 12. Right? We grab a calculator, not 48. 84 divided by 12 is 7.
Oh, that was close.
So our answer is D is equal to 7. Okay? So the reason why I asked you to do the fraction line instead of the division symbol is next year all of your answers will be fractions. Right? This year, for the most part of it, unless I give you a tricky question, your answers will be whole numbers. Right? Maybe a decimal if we're working with decimals. Right? This is leading into grade 9, leading 12. If you do it this way, then your answer already becomes in the fraction format, which we're going to be doing next year. Right? So I finished this chapter last week with my grade 9s. So this is how grade 8 looks like. So if I go to my grade 9 class from this year, the end of grade 9, so around May this time next year, April, May, this is, if you're in my class again, right, we start off with questions like you just did. Oops, zoom out. Sort of just like what we're doing right now. But by the end of next year, we are going to be doing stuff like this.
What?
All right? A lot of fractions involved, so the steps for this year is sort of to make next year easier.
What the shake?
It'll be fine. Usually by the end of this chapter, 90% of my students in grade 9 like, this is easy, so this is one of my easiest chapters. There's a lot of frustrations at the beginning.
That is going.
All right? But by the end of it, students are like, I get this, Mr. Dhaliwal. So, shh. I'm showing you it this year, so next year, you know where you're headed, right? And there's a reason why I always teach things. I teach things in a certain way to make next year easier. Because I spent my whole career teaching grades 10s, 11s, and 12s.
What does Miss Chen teach?
She only teaches grade 8s, right? Right? There's 4 or 5 different teachers who teach Math 9. So you could have me next year, you can have Mr. Dewick, you can have Miss Bamnia, you can have Miss Owens, Miss Riches, right? There's quite a few teachers who teach grade 9 stuff. All right. So, not too bad. All right? Now, let's do the next one. We have B here, right? So, we split at the equal side, Thomas. Draw the vertical one. This is our halfway point, right? Put your hand over the side that doesn't have the letter. Focus on the number that you want to get rid of. That's here. Ask yourself the question. Between the number and the letter, what math operation is it? Is it adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing? All right? Thomas, you can go. So now, it's always what's between the number and the letter. Here's the number, here's the letter. What's the math operation in between? Multiplication. If you don't see anything, it means it's a times. Right? So there is a little times in here. So we do the opposite. right? And the opposite is always, okay, we're going to divide. And some people are like, hey, Mr. Dhaliwal, what do I divide by? Right? You're always dividing by the number that you're trying to get rid of. So what's the number we're trying to get rid of here?
B.
You're right, Fiona, close. 5 and
B.
the number and the negative sign. It's a negative 5. So you want to get rid of the 5 and the negative at the same time. So negative 5 over here and negative 5 here. It should be symmetrical on both sides. You should see a mirror image going down. So just like before, when we're dividing, negative 5 divided by negative 5. Show this is how we did our fractions unit, right? Number on the top cancels a number on the bottom, right? We have B sitting here. On the other side, can you do that calculation in your head? What's negative 45 divided by negative 5? How many times does 5 fit into 9? Oh, sorry, I have to give you the answer. 5 fits into 45 9 times. And it'll be positive 9 because your two negatives that cancel each other out. And we're done. B equals 9. Right? So, I teach you this method because last year, and it's a valid method, so going up here on the top section, on a question like this, there's a method called inspection. And since the numbers are so easy to see, and if you're good at your multiplication, you can probably tell me what the answer is. 3 times something is 12.
4.
What's that something? It's 4, right? And what happens is a lot of grade 7 students and some grade 8 students, depending on where they're taught, is they can see the answers when they get to grade 9, they can't do the work because they haven't learned the methods. They'll always just look at the question and know the answer. You're strong mathematically. But what happens is I can give you a question just like this one, and it's saying instead of saying 3x, instead of saying 3x, I could just change this to, say, 4.3. Then all of a sudden, you can't do this question in your head anymore. So this is the reason why I'm going to be stickler and say, hey, do it the way I'm asking. Because, yeah, some of these, you can probably just look at it and say, hey, I can tell you what the answer is just by looking at it. So, well, I didn't really change the question. I just made it 4.3 instead of 3. Right? Can anybody just look at this and tell me what the answer is now?
No.
Probably not. But if you follow the procedure, you can solve it. We go like this. We split at the equal sign. Cover this up. We want to get rid of that 4.3. You ask yourself the question, what's the math operation between the 4.3 and the x? Add, subtract, multiply, or divide? Times. Opposite. Divide. And so you go, okay, I want to get rid of this 4.3. I'm going to divide by 4.3. And divide by 4.3. Those 4.3s cancel out. And the other side, we grab our calculator, you go negative 12 divided by 4.3, we get our answer. What number do you get for that? You're working it out?
120 over 43.
No, as a decimal.
Oh, the decimal is 2.790697.
2.79. We'll say that. And it's negative, right?
Yeah.
And that's it. Right? So,
You said the whole thing. Yeah.
right? So that's the way we're going to do this. Not because you can't just look at this and you can figure it out. Because there's a reason behind it. Right? Let's do another question here.
2.79.
Yeah, I think that's what he said. Let's verify. You go 12, negative 12 divided by 4.3, 2.79. All right. We don't need to have all the decimals. All right, let's do another one here. I'm going to jump around here. Let's do 2 more and I'll stop. Okay, we split at the equal sign. All right, we cover up the side that doesn't have the letter. We focus on the number because that's what we want to get, but you want to get the letter all by itself. So you ask yourself the question, what's the math operation between the number and the letter?
Can you see that one?
What's the operation? Adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing?
Plus.
Plus, adding. So we do the opposite of adding. Subtraction. Right? So we're gonna, instead of adding, now we're gonna do the opposite, which is subtracting. And what number do you subtract? Well, the same number you see. 5. Subtract 5. Subtract 5. Okay? Now, if you go 5, oh, thanks on this side, cash. On this side, 13 minus 5 is 8.
Yeah.
On the other side, what's 5 minus 5?
0.
0. So that disappears. And we have a S here.
Oh, S.
And our answer is S is equal to 8. And you can probably look at it, you know that something plus 5 is 13. Well, that something must be an 8. Okay? So when we are looking to cancel a number, I want you to think of ones and zeros. When you're adding and subtracting and you're doing opposites, your goal is to make zeros, just like we did here. When you are multiplying and dividing, the way we cancel is to make ones. To get rid of a number, it's always ones or zeros. When you're adding and subtracting, we're looking to make zeros. When you're multiplying and dividing, we're looking to make ones. Okay? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to stop right there. We'll do a warm-up next day. And there we go. You got
Are you still watching now?